right. Hey, well, thank you very much. Thanks, Julie, for introducing us. I'm kind of a wanderer, and I know I'm supposed to stay behind these microphones. So if anybody can't hear me, or if he can't hear me, somebody just point me back and I'll come back. Thanks, Julie, so much for introducing us. We are really excited to be here. As Julie said, I'm Scott Post with Prine & Newhoff. This is Matt Lewandowski. I'm a civil engineer. Matt is a landscape architect. We have found over time that the best trails have the combination of the engineering and the architecture involved, and we're just pumped to be a part of this project. We understand that a lot of work has gone into this project before us. We feel like we're walking in the feet of giants to an extent, given the amount of time and the amount of effort. And producing the preliminary design here tonight is pretty exciting. So thank you for having us. We wanted to get into talking about what we understood the strategic goals for this project to be. These were the ones presented to us early on. We had that I think that the past planning groups had put together, and through a lot of feedback from you guys in the public and the local communities. So we wanted to talk through those things right now so you understand just from a very preliminary perspective, from a very basic perspective, where we were coming from. Going through those, we wanted to understand and respect the history, context, and culture of this trail corridor, understand the trail users' perspectives, advance the trail's development and develop more miles of trails, cultivate Boardman Lake Trail champions by connecting with the hearts and minds of the people, create meaningful connections for work, play, and health, develop a strategy for trail development funding and long-term maintenance, and engage with the volunteers and partners. For starters, this was the area that the scope of the area that we were given to take a look at and start looking at potential routes in this area. We didn't want to specify a specific route at first. It was an area. Look at the area, look at different options through this area, and come up with something that will work, meeting those parameters and meeting the feelings and the opinions of the public. As you can see, I want to go back a little bit. You can see that the East Boardman Lake Trail, starting at Medalli Park, comes all the way around up the top past the kayak launch to some city-owned land right there. The clear and obvious missing piece is this completion of the loop, which is the West Boardman Lake Trail. For the purpose of our presentation tonight and the purpose of our preliminary design, we split it into 4 areas. The first area is the north end. The second area we called the Narrows. The third area is the Northwest Michigan College area. And then the last one is the south end, on the south end, obviously. Starters, I'd like to just tell you we listened carefully, and I'd like Matt to talk a little bit about how we listened carefully.
Yeah, so first I'd like to just thank Megan Olds and Sarah Naparella from Parallel Solutions. They did an awesome job helping bring all of the important information we needed to know from the public, from the focus groups, the committees, and just you, the public, as to kind of what this trail was going to look like. And so this diagram here is kind of interesting. I believe this is called a Wordle. You guys maybe have seen these on Facebook or wherever. But what we did is took all of the comments that came in and created this Wordle, and so it automatically visually shows you kind of what was the most important themes, and it naturally pulls those out. So you can see here that it's quite obvious. The brightest color and the largest words here were recreation and water, which makes a lot of sense considering, I'm sure many of you have been out there, that's the first thing that strikes you is the beautiful views of the water. And recreation, obviously, is an important feature for a trail. You'll notice also that lake is a large word that you see there, as well as the next brightest ones you'd see would be bike and connections and exercise, views, steep slopes, safety. So these are some of the things, and you can look at the other words too and see what some of the themes were. But we used kind of this document and the public input to kind of help guide where this trail might want to go and help us evaluate the different options that were out there for where the trail might want to go. So we applied your thoughts to the design.
Okay, we want to start talking now about the overall trail, the routes we've looked at, the alternatives we've looked at. After we go through some of the alternates, we'll highlight the route that we've chosen based on everything that we're hearing from the public meetings, the data that's been collected by Parallel Solutions and by TART, and then that will help show how we arrived at the final route. Starting here at the north end, trail goes from the end of the existing trail at 14th down to 16th, where there's some city-owned property with a small piece of sidewalk as well. The city owns some land there, some parkland, and so we wanted to make sure we included that in there as well. Alternate routes from here, one of the ways we looked at was going down Cass Street. We looked at it. Cass Street has some issues with it, doing this route, some of them being the grades, probably the biggest one, the grades. Looking at it, with using the GIS, I calculated some just slopes, and we're at 7% in a few spots, possibly a little higher. To make a trail still meet the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, it has to be 5% max. So that's the first thing, and even with that, let's say this was the sidewalk, people will not use it. It's too steep. Your average family isn't going to go up a trail with an extended slope of 7% or even much more than 5%. There's also other issues here, narrower right-of-way, significant number of easements would have to be obtained. It's a utility corridor as well. There's lots of utility poles that we would have to work with in relocating on this route. And so those are some of the reasons that this was not one of our preferred routes.
And also I'd like to add here too that, looking back to that little diagram I showed you, the character of Cass Road obviously is a little different than the character as if you were by the water. So thinking about it from the human and the user's perspective, this has some negatives to it.
Yeah, it doesn't meet the character of the trail that came out of the previous studies. It does, however, provide access to Beta. It also provides access to the employment base, including Tyson Sara Lee, which is right there, and other employees that are over in that direction. Continuing that route would require a continuation down South Airport Road as well, which has many of the same issues. You have a steeper slope. You have a very narrow right-of-way. The ground drops off on the north side as you get to the bottom of the hill. And many of the same things. That I think the maximum slope on this stretch was somewhere in the 6 to 8% as well, making it as problematic as well. You still have the issue, too, of crossing the Boardman River. No one wants to ride. South Airport Road is not set up for bikes. It's very busy.
That resonated.
There's no room either. There's no bike lanes. So we recognize that getting across the river would require something separate anyway. So anyway, looking at that, our preferred route, I'm getting too far away, I think. Our preferred route would be to stay right along the rail corridor from 16th South, from that section. Now, one of the alternate routes we looked at here, and I've talked to a couple people about this already as well, is the lower route. Taking, as many of you guys are aware, it's a lot higher where the red is to down where the yellow is. In fact, depending on where you are, it's anywhere from 26 to 36 feet from the upper top where the rail is down to the water level. It makes this difficult to build a path there. In order to meet ADA requirements, again, we have to meet 5% max. So for 25 feet, coming down 25 feet, that's 500 feet of grade that you have to use to make up. So you can't just go down low and then stay down low and then come back up when you want. And believe it or not, even in this area down here where you are predominantly low, the ground goes up and down quite a bit. So in order to make that work, it would require quite a bit of cuts and fills down in there, which I think would take away the character down there, as well as being a little bit more of a problematic route.
And to touch also on, the environmental impact, bringing the trail through there would require probably a lot more tree removal. As well as I wanted to point out too that, even if we were able to do the 5% slopes in that area, it can be difficult even at 5% over a very long stretch for somebody with any sort of mobility challenges. It's not just a person in a wheelchair, somebody who just has trouble walking or or whatnot. So that's something that we considered too. Wasn't just the wheelchair access, was just how difficult would this be to do. So
actually, that's a good point, Matt. 5% is the maximum grade that ADA allows or requires or recommends, but 500 feet at 5% does add up fast, and you really do feel that. The next stretch of this going around is going around what we call the Cove area. We looked at this way a lot. It was one of the routes that was in the original study. We don't like this for several reasons. I think the biggest one is the fact that we've heard from so many people throughout this entire process that this is one of their favorite areas, that migrating birds come here. There's a lot of bird watchers who like to go there. People have said they've seen bobcats. Just nature abounds in that corner there. Putting a path around the edge of that cove would essentially scare away most of the animals that you would be there to look at. And so that was one of the reasons that we didn't like that. It is a little longer. It also, to do that route makes it difficult to get back up when we need to get back up to make a connection to the business area and get potential connections to sidewalk network and get back up to the corner of South Airport and Cass as well.
Scott, did you want to also quick touch on how we look at the difference between actually building the trail on that slope versus needing a boardwalk?
No, you can get into that.
Okay. No, what I just wanted to point out was that if we went on ground in that area, it would require obviously more tree removal and more extensive grading to the hillside. But you could do a boardwalk. It just happens to be quite a long boardwalk also. So I just wanted to point out there were two options in that cove scenario.
That's true. I didn't
and
think.
I know you knew that.
And what he's getting at too is going on the hill. The other issue is that the hill goes up pretty steeply there, and it's not all an even slope. So what you'd end up to build something into that hill would require an incredible amount of cuts in one places with retaining walls, and then an incredible amount of fill in other places. So the devastation to that hillside would be, it would remove all the natural character of the hillside to actually try to cut into that hill. And again, you have the same issue. You're coming up, 36 feet, and so you're coming up. You have a slope that's got to be, you have to have your slope 600 feet long, and you almost don't even have 600 feet there.
Right. Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's good. The final of this alternate route, too, was coming once we get to Logan's Landing, was to use the existing bridge there. We went and looked at the bridge. Some of the issues that go with it is that it really doesn't meet AASHTO. It's not really wide enough. And in addition to the width, there's also a sloping walls and ceiling. And I'm not sure I didn't measure it, but I don't remember the ceiling being 10 feet. So I don't think there's enough head clearance either. In addition to that, structurally, we haven't done a structural review on the bridge, but that bridge needs a lot of maintenance. And I think that by the time that it was built up to the point at which it could then be used for this purpose, you may have invested that in another bridge. But in addition to that, and I think this is the most key, is that there's active businesses going on there. We walk past, there's a hairstylist on one place, there's some shops in a couple of the other places. And if everybody, and I believe that when this loop is completed, it's going to be an extremely popular route. If you have everybody going across that bridge in the middle of riding their bikes, walking their bikes, in the middle of just everyone else using it for their daily business, I think we're going to end up with some issues, some just interaction issues.
But we wanted to look at it and just give it a fair shot, since there was already an existing crossing.
Yeah. Okay, so the route that we're looking at for our preferred route then would be staying up top along the Rill, staying up top along the north side of Northwest Michigan College, staying along the top of the bank in the front of Northwest Michigan College, and then gradually coming down where the land actually comes down on a reasonable slope on the south side of the college, down to the point there. It's just beautiful down in there. The woods, looks like a mature woods. There's a lot of open space between large trees. And we wanted to take advantage of that as well.
That'll look a little more clear probably in the enlarged views.
Yes.
So we'll take a look at those too.
Yep. We'll get into more specifics of the final route in a minute after we go through the alternatives. There, crossing the shallow cove area with a boardwalk across the middle there to Logan's Landing, coming through across a new prefabricated bridge strictly for the purpose of the trail to Medalley Park. And then with that, we can actually still make that tie-in to Wysong and Cybrant without killing ourselves for grades. It fits in very well to build sidewalks then in the future down Cybrant or Wysong, tying in South Airport or Cass into that area of town over there where we do want to make a destination. Okay. Now, going into some of we're in the north area, going into the preferred route, some of the details on the preferred route. This is the north area. We plan to start at the end of the existing path right there, stay in the rail corridor. That's after meeting with people, talking. That seemed to be the preferred route, and it really fits in there well. Coming down to 16th with the 5-foot concrete sidewalk, utilizing the city property, and I'm going to let Matt tell you a little bit more about some of the details there.
So we wanted to look at, this city property is such a great little piece. We felt like this lends itself a little more to a more walking, slower pace. So you could imagine some benches along this 6-foot wide concrete path, as well as a little stair down to a new fishing platform perhaps. And then one thing that strikes you as you come around the corner there near Right Brain, it's just an incredible view to the south. So we're proposing there, and you'll notice on these enlargements that the blue triangles refer to overlooks. And then there's a little yellow dot there you'll see that says trail map. That symbolizes where we think it'd be a great place for a little connection, a map to give people something to reference. They know where they're at and they can see themselves in the kind of greater context of the trail system. So,
yeah, the nodes, we tried to propose nodes at the locations where the trail interacts with where it splits on itself or it interacts with other trails coming in, so that you always know where you're going to go. And I apologize if I look like I'm bouncing around. I really, truly feel trapped behind this podium. I normally am walking around a little bit, so I'm sliding back and forth. Moving on, this is the narrow section. We'd like to stay right along the rail, right on the rail property, right along the tracks, a ways away from the tracks. We've been working with MDOT Rail to work with this location. There's some private property immediately to the east of it that we'd like to avoid as well. Then, as you know, it drops off pretty sharply there, and we propose a couple of boardwalks in that location.
And these boardwalks would be, as you talked before, out over the edge a little bit of the grade drops down so significantly there that you really do need a boardwalk in that location. And of course, what a better chance than to just have a couple of additional overlooks. I think you're going to find people wanting to stop there. So these would be designed in a way that would be safe, so people could stop, enjoy the view for a little while, and not worry about as much about somebody coming behind them along the trail. So these would be designed to bump out. And because of the popularity we see for this trail and the views from this spot in particular, we think it'll be nice to have more than one of those. So we're showing 4. It may not exactly be 4 when it's all done. It could be 3 or 2, but there's a number of places you could stop and rest in this spot.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about the locations. You guys know, this is your backyard. This is an incredible spot for a trail. And not only an incredible spot for a trail, even if there was no trail here, these are incredible spots for just overlooks. I mean, you drive down the highway and they have scenic overlooks. The views off of some of these are superior to many of the scenic overlooks you see along the highway. We anticipate that these overlooks off the boardwalk, it could be 20-some feet off of the water below you. And so your view is going to be, you're going to have this nice perception of being up high with a beautiful overlook of everything beneath you. And I went the wrong way. Okay, this is the Northwestern Michigan College region here. Again, we talked about coming across the end of that overlook with a boardwalk on the north end, coming down, putting a node sort of at the north corner of Northwest Michigan College's parking lot. The purpose of this would not be to create a trailhead or anything. The purpose of this would be to provide access for Northwest Michigan College students who are using the bike path to get to school, or during a break school go for a bike ride around the area. This is a very doable trail during breaks. And so we wanted to make sure that there was access for them. We put it out of the way to try to make sure that it wasn't looked at as public access for the trail. Coming through there, down through here, benching the trail a little bit because of the hills. The nice thing about that is that it provides a little bit of break in your vision. So if you have students that are in their classrooms and they're looking out over it, they don't just see people walking. You know, there's a wall there, so you see like half a person walking, you know. It's not as distracting. It blends in a little bit better from their perspective. But this route we really like because there's a couple of patios here along the edge of the building, and then this lines up grade-wise right along that same grade area, so that anybody who's at the school or using the school immediately has access to the trail in all of those locations. From there, again, coming past the detention area for the school, which is right there, coming down the slope to the edge of the Narrows region, and then splitting, there's a natural break. It looks like it was an old two-track through the woods that we can follow, which gets us up to that corner of Wysong and Cybrant to create access to the business district for workers who are commuting and for people who are trying to get to Cass and South Olive.
One thing I wanted to point out here too is that, again, under the idea that we're trying to be environmentally sensitive, any chance we had that made sense within the design to be able to utilize some existing paths or previously graded or cleared areas that made sense, we tried to take advantage of those. And both of those on that split right there felt like a good spot to do that.
And the nice thing about this is, as Julie mentioned, we have done a full topographical survey of the area. We have the actual elevations of the ground. So when we're able to lay out the downslope here, we're actually able to calculate the cuts and fills it'll take to do it. And they're very doable. All the proposed heights, the proposed elevations, we've looked at more than just on a GIS map. We've actually looked at it using survey data, and it is doable. The final section is the southern section. We're really excited to build a boardwalk across the Narrow area. And we've reviewed this option with the DEQ as well already up front, and have been told that this is very permittable and in many ways preferable to trying to go along the inside of the cove. The other advantage too is that it's very much shorter than the other route. So as far as cost and in addition to environmental impact, as far as cost, it's significantly shorter and therefore less. Coming through Logan's Landing, around the businesses, trying to avoid and minimize any impact to existing businesses and existing private properties there.
What is the depth of the muck in that cove area?
We actually have soil borings in process right now. So we'll know soon. Not yet.
Does the boardwalk, is that above, I mean, how far above the water is that at that point?
Yeah, well, I stole Matt's thunder by messing up the but we're looking at a boardwalk that would be about 5 feet off the water, sort of an elevation which makes it easy enough for a kayak to get underneath, and people who want to go around and look at that in a quiet, passive way, but at the same time not being so high that it becomes what you see.
Right.
Is that 5 feet at the highest lake level? Because the lake level will always fluctuate a little bit.
The lake level fluctuates a little bit. Fortunately, the final elevation of the lake is controlled by the dam farther downstream, so we know that it doesn't have a described floodplain because of that. And so, yes, we would make sure that it was 5 feet above the highest lake level at that point.
And I'll quick touch on the boardwalk there. One of the things you'll notice, obviously, right off the bat is that it's not straight. So being a landscape architect, you know, we like to put curves in things and take all the straight lines out that engineers may end up wanting to do.
It was such a direct route across. I thought it was perfect.
Which it would work. That would work, but I just thought this would be a great chance to put a slight curve in, nothing that would make it astronomically more expensive. This is all going to be designed, I imagine, in a way that's just really sensitive, and we want to be sensitive to the views from the businesses and in the cove looking out, and we don't want this to be an eyesore necessarily, but there's no reason it can't look nice. So we've got, you'll notice here too, the two little overlooks. Those would be separated boardwalks that would likely be a little bit smaller width. This would be somewhere you would be able to stop, sit at a bench. There could perhaps be interpretive signs to explain the history of Boardman Lake. I know it's got a long history. And then particularly, Scott, if you could point to the first one closer to the side, this side. That one lends itself more naturally to somebody who was coming out to just catch a good view of the lake. And then the other overlook points the opposite direction. So that's going to lend itself more naturally to people who are going to want to observe waterfowl and whatever activities are going on with the wildlife in the cove. So, and again, the reason that they're designed separate is it's a safety thing. This is going to be 12 feet wide. There could be some bikers cruising through, and when you've got kids or you're fishing, perhaps, you don't want to have to worry about hooking the biker or your little kid running off and getting run over by the guy who's cruising to work and he's late. So that's just one of the considerations why we've done that. It does add some cost to it, perhaps, but I think it's probably worth it.
It also is kind of nice because you're creating a route that is both a commuter route for anybody who wants to use this simply to get from A to B, can use it without having to worry about people who are there for other reasons. But at the same time, anybody who's there for just a stroll or who wants to stop or look out over at the lake, look at the birds, they can do so without having to worry about that. Either A, they're in the way of a commuter, or they don't have to worry about the fact that the commuter is going to be bothering them. Sort of having a dual purpose for the whole trail.
Can I ask a question about the boardwalk?
Yeah.
Since wood, when it gets wet, can be very slippery and is hazardous, sometimes hazardous to bicycles, is there any way to treat it or put some surface on it that would be not quite as slippery as wet wood?
Yeah, that's one of the, as Julie mentioned earlier, this is the preliminary design phase, and yes, definitely those will be considered into. A lot of the things we're looking at too are what materials to build this out of. You know, there are environmentally friendlier materials. You know, you can use some of the reclaimed plastic, like Trex decking, or you can use an easily sustainably harvest type of wood. And in each one of them, they have their advantages and disadvantages, and the surface slickness is definitely going to be a consideration of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
What is the length of the boardwalk?
Yeah, I was going to say it's over 600. Julie's saying 650. I think she's correct. I'll go with that. Yeah.
Any considerations for ice in the winter, not on the boardwalk, but affecting the posts and things like that?
Oh, you mean, yes, we will. Definitely that is part of, that's an excellent question. I actually don't get asked that very often. When you design something in a lake like this, the ice impact, especially when it's tied to a river, so you have flow, that is definitely part of the design, part of the pile design for the boardwalk. Yeah, that's a.
Be able to withstand that.
Yeah, it would be designed to be able to withstand that. Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot. Is there any other questions?
Is that the next little clear span bridge we had on that?
Oh yeah.
Is that going to be kind of like the bridges on the north end of the lake, or Boardman Lake?
Yeah, to an extent, yes. I mean, they're both going to be a prefabricated steel bridge of sorts. I think that one of the things that, you know, in talking to Julie and in talking to at the public meetings, a lot of people wanted more of an open deck, more of an open feel to it. So it won't be a box structure; it would be an open top structure.
But it'd be kind of up like that.
Correct.
Yeah.
There would be an arch to it. Yes.
A lot of the details of this, those kind of things, you know, we'll away the options cost-wise, but those will get decided at the next phase when you're actually getting into construction drawings.
The nuts and bolts of the details, yeah.
Are you considering another bridge to connect to the existing trail over the other part so that you don't have that big right angle jog and so on? Is that an optional part of this proposal, or not?
It's not part of the scope of the West Boardman Lake Trail, but I do know that you guys have thought very much about that.
Yeah, yeah. It's out of their scope, but it's certainly something that comes up a lot.
You can't get from the star over to existing path.
Correct.
Yes. Right over here. And I think that's where he's talking about the 90 degree. There's sorry, I don't want to laser you in the eye, but it's, yeah.
That Logan's Landing, is that private property?
Yes. Yeah. So we have breakout tables and maps, and I want to be able to get to some detailed questions that folks might have. Scott and Matt are going to be posted over there. We have really important information that we want your feedback on. So each of you got a comment card. Sorry, each of you got a comment card. I'm with you, Scott, when you came in, and what we'd like to know. So what Matt and Scott walked us through, again, is the preferred design alternative. They have a lot more work to do on those, surface types, and what does it feel like, and what does it look like, and how do we start building budgets around these things? What does that look like? But what we want to make sure today is that we're on the right track, that this concept that has been presented, it's basically saying, all right, we got the green light, guys. Let's make sure that we didn't miss anything big, that there's not something outstanding. So we want to know your feedback as just in general, how satisfied are you with the preferred route? And then we've got specific questions with what you like most, what you like least, and if you have any questions. So the way it'll work from here is, again, the whole time is kind of, right, we touch, we go, we draw a little, make sure it's what you're thinking, and then we go back. This is the stopping point before we tell them to keep going and spend the time and AKA money to really get into more design. We are going to stay high level. We are not going to be doing structural studies. We are not going to be doing this. They were charged with giving us a design and a budget that can be built so that we don't put out something that we can't do, or are surprised when we go out to bid. But we are staying high level. So what you're going to do tonight is be able to ask questions, but we're still right first step. So all the really good detailed design stuff, that's a ways away. So tonight we just want to hear about what you think about the alignment option offered, and then what you're thinking just in general about the design. So we're going to be at those tables, and we want you to spend as much time until they kick us out as you'd like with us this evening to get some of your more detailed questions answered. Are we ready? Are we ready to break up? We're going to head over. All questions are fair game.